sometimes that were outright. And a lot of the racisms that I noticed towards me were more microaggressions, but over time it became one of those things like, okay, like we gotta end this. The way that I talk, the way that I acted. I remember a time where I was talking on the phone with someone, and just hearing them, like, because they knew who I was, and then hearing me talk on the phone, it's like, oh wow, dude, you don't sound black on the phone, man. You sound white. I'm like, oh, you sound so proper, and it was like, wait, what? Like, huh? And even with like conversations like, oh, you're not like those black people, like like you're different. How so? What do we mean? Like, well, you're just proper. You're educated. You got some sense and whatnot. And it's just like, wait a minute. Like, what are we saying? And to me, that's when I realized that people put like stereotype mannerisms with a race. Like, if you're saying educated, intelligence, smart, has some sense, are we associating that with being white? And so what do we associate with black? And if you're saying that I'm not black, then are you saying that I don't fit in with my culture, but I don't fit in with your culture, so where do I fit in?
I've worked on staff in two multi-ethnic ministries and served in leadership and pastoral roles, and I'll never forget the time that it was my first week in this particular church, and I walked in the hallway. I was getting to know everyone, introducing myself, and just getting to know the people. And this older Caucasian gentleman, he walked up to me. We started having a great conversation, but then he looked at me up and down in a very strange way. And he saw my tattoos. He looked at my tattoos, grabbed my arm, and he said, "You've been down a bad path, haven't you?" And at that very moment, I will never forget the feeling that I had. And I had to lovingly correct him about the tattoos. I had to lovingly correct him. And I said, "Sir, you've never met me before. I don't think you should assume anything about my life or my background based upon my appearance." And at that very moment, I remember knowing that this man judged me based upon my appearance, my skin color, and my tattoos before he got a chance to know the character of my manhood. And at that moment, it communicated to me that we have a very long way to go, not just as a people, but as a church, as a body of Christ.
So my response is I can't tell you a story of that because I've never had to experience it because of my race. So,
in general, I would say it happens on an often basis. If it's not from where I work, going to and fro to different places, maybe the grocery store, because of how I dress, how I talk, the people that I hang out with. If we're seen by others, we're seen as a certain way. But specifically, I work for diplomatic security. And so with what I do my best to bring excellence every day. No matter what, no matter the situation, no matter the tribulation or trial that I'm under, I don't have an excuse to not bring excellence. And so I do my best to live by that and have that mindset. If I don't, when I'm seen at the water cooler, or when I'm seen in the cafeteria gathered amongst colleagues, or with an affinity group, and you hear colloquials being used and things of that nature, trust and believe people in the office place take liberties, and they get a little too familiar with you, and they take liberties with you that they really shouldn't. And assumptions are made. And so Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's a very well-known writer, has this concept called the double good. And as an African-American male, as a black male, you have to be doubly good in society. So I don't have any other choice but to be that because of how I'm seen.
I grew up in DC during it was called Chocolate City. In my school, it wasn't predominantly black, it was all black. And so I had not encountered feeling different or any type of racism or anything that was maybe even implicit biases until I went to college. And I will never forget walking into physics class on the first day and being the only Black woman in the class. And then the professor asked everyone to find partners. And my class was full of white men, and no one wanted to partner with me. And that moment, as I reflect on it, like I felt so out of place and so heartbroken. I didn't understand why everyone else was partnering with each other, but it was like I was the last resort. And that was the first time I realized, okay, this is different. I had not experienced anything like that before.
So a few weeks ago, the N-word was written in spray paint or something on the football field of our local high school, the high school that my children will go to. And that was difficult for me because I felt like in that moment that, you know, it felt like we've moved forward, and it felt like, you know, we're not there anymore. And I felt like it was bad enough that it happened. But then maybe about a week or two later, my son was invited to a sleepover. And he's gone over, you know, to his friends' houses before and no problem. By the way, everybody's amazing. Like, these women are awesome. Kids are awesome. But he goes over to his friend's house, and I ask him, you know, we just started a conversation. He got dropped off at 6 o'clock in the morning, so we started talking at about 7. And I'm like, hey, you know, so how was your day? Like, how did you enjoy your time there? It's like, yeah. And then we walked to the store. And at that moment, my heart sank into my stomach, and I'm trying to drive. And I'm like, you did what? And he's like, we walked to the store. We were going to get ice cream. Black boys are looked at as men before they are men. And in this instance, nothing happened, and they were completely safe, and it was fine. But in that instant when he told me that, I thought of other children that have been walking home from the store and were murdered, or walking home and they were arrested because they looked like someone, or even if he's with his group of friends and one of them decides to pick up a rock and throw it at a car or something, and something happens and the police are called and he gets scared and he runs. Or if he gets scared and he, you know, puts his hands in his pocket because he doesn't know what to do. Like, in that moment, my child is a threat. Where the other children, they're not seen as a threat. They're the same age. Like, they're just a group of friends walking down the street. But if something happens, I have this implicit fear that I don't know if my child is going to be treated the same. With everything going on, sometimes it's just really obvious to me that I have to do things to raise my children differently than a white mother might have to do for her children. And I don't necessarily want that mother to have to do the things that I have to do or think the things that I have to think, because none of us should have to. I don't want to bring someone down to where I am and what I have to do. I would rather be up with you, that we don't even have to think about those kinds of things because they're not an issue. But that's not the case.